Why did you collect The Time to Speak? And is this just a book for lawyers, or is it
Well, I
more
collected
broad?
the articles that went here because the Intercollegiate Studies Institute approached me and asked me to make a selection that they could publish. So I did, and of course, this is not a book for lawyers. Some of the comments I have so far on early readers, like the two articles at the end about martinis, which is not exclusively a taste for lawyers, then no, it's written. I don't think there's any legal jargon in that whole book. I remember when I first published an article with Fortune magazine called "The Crisis in Antitrust," which is in there. They showed it to their outside law firm, who sent back word that I was not a lawyer, it was a fraud, because lawyers don't write that way. But so they they got nervous and called my old law firm, and assured them that I was a lawyer. But I don't really admire much legal style of writing. There's no need for it. You can express the ideas of the law or the ideas about the culture in a variety of ways, without any jargon and perfectly plain English that anybody can understand. And I attempt to do that in those books because a lot of those articles in there appeared in popular journals.
Yeah, it did seem very. The articles were very clear and not typical of legal writing. I wanted to ask you. President Obama's talked about the need for judges with empathy, and I wanted to ask you: have judges strayed from the role they should be playing? And what do you think of President-elect Obama's plans for appointing judges?
Well, I would be even more concerned about Obama's view of judges, except for the fact that the likely resignations from the Supreme Court are the liberals. They're the age to begin retiring. So his appointments would probably be younger liberals replacing older liberals on the Supreme Court. Where Obama's views are going to have real impact are in the lower federal courts. Now that's important because almost none of the cases in the lower federal courts get to the Supreme Court. I forget, there are tens of thousands of cases every year in the lower federal courts, and the Supreme Court takes about 80, which means that most of the law is being made by lower courts, which Obama will have a chance to affect. And he has said that he wants judges. Well, first place, he said that the law is clear in all but 1% of the cases, which is definitely not true. There wouldn't be any room for argument if it was that clear. But he says in those cases where the law isn't clear, he wants a judge who will be sympathetic to the poor, the disabled, and so forth. Now that's a statement that if the statute or the decisions don't support this poor person or that disabled person, he wants a judge who will perhaps stray from the law to enact his social sympathies. And that worries me because once that starts, and it has started already, you begin to get a lawless court, and nobody can rely upon the court for even-handed justice.
Yeah, it's one of the things I guess I wanted. You've talked a lot about the intentions of the framers and originalism. What is the difference between originalism and original meaning and judicial restraint? Are they all the same thing, or?
Well, originalism, I think we had to define that because there is now a large debate taking place in the academic world and in the political world about original understanding. And what it is the theory that, the idea that a judge should look to the principles of the Constitution as they were originally understood, as they were understood when the Constitution became law. Not and not wander off into principles or results that were not conceivably understood. And we have much of our law now is law that the framers and the people who made the Constitution law would never put up with.
You know, most people on a given legal case tend to look to the result, and they think the decision is good if they like the result.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, it's really quite educated people make that mistake. I remember Morton Kondracki on television when the Texas homosexual sodomy case came up. He said the only issue in the case was whether you wanted to see homosexuals in jail. That's not the issue in the case at all. The only issue in the case is who should make the law, the legislature or the court, when there is no law to begin with until somebody acts.
Are there things that the Constitution, major things that the Constitution doesn't protect against? In other words, are there a lot of bad things that can happen which the Constitution doesn't address?
No, I can't think of any bad things that are going to happen. There'll be laws will be passed that I don't like, but I can't classify that automatically as a bad thing. I remember a student asking me, did the Constitution protect marriage? Well, it doesn't really. They didn't think anybody was insane enough to get rid of marriage, and nobody is. But the student said he couldn't put up with any theory that didn't protect marriage. Now that's a hypothetical about a horrible world, which is never going to come to pass, but those hypotheticals are used as arguments to shape the law. And there's some theory that if the Constitution doesn't protect it, it's not protected. The main protection the American people have is the understanding of the American people about the laws they pass, not about the Constitution. In fact, most of our freedoms are in statutory law, not in constitutional law.
You said a couple other things I wanted.
I said a couple of other things there. I hope you haven't got the embarrassing ones, but go ahead.
I only have a couple of the embarrassing ones. You said that an intentionalist, and this is a quote from a long time ago, in the early 60s, that you have in a time to speak. All that an intentionalist, which is I think basically the same as an originalist, requires is that the text, structure, and history of the Constitution provide him not with a conclusion, but with a major premise. The premise states a core value that the framers intended to protect. The intentionalist judge must then supply the minor premise in order to protect the constitutional freedom in circumstances the framers could not foresee. That's an interesting and slightly different explanation than I've heard some other people give, and I'm wondering whether you think there could be a problem there with when the judges are supplying the minor premise, that they are introducing their own ideas and not following the Constitution.
Well, it's inevitable when a judge decides a case that to some degree he introduces his own ideas, because he has to ask, is this case within that principle? And that doesn't come automatically. Let me give you an example. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution says that there should be no unreasonable searches and seizures. Well, when they wrote that, they were thinking about a constable clomping through your house or into your office and seizing papers. Then, as technology changed, and the government had the ability to put an electronic device to listen in your house or your office without your knowing it, the court took a little while to get around that, but they finally understood that the principle was the same. Now, the major premise is no unreasonable searches and seizures. The minor premise is this thing a search and seizure? I don't think that gives the judge too much latitude. It's what judges have to do in every case.